Okay, let's get started. Application on the midpoint. So we did explain in the other video what is the midpoint. The midpoint is the middle point between 2 points where it divides the distance between, let me write it there for you, the distance between, let's say this is B, this is A. If this is the midpoint, the distance between A to M will be the same as the distance between M to B, and it's given by this formula. We add up the x values, divide them by 2 and add up this, and then divide it by 2. Okay, so this is quite straightforward. They can ask you such a question, and then I want to do the application questions they will normally ask you. So they're going to say determine the values of x and y if, now in this case they give you the midpoint. If the midpoint is 5 and 2, so how do you do such a question? Of the 2 points A and B, and which A is given as what? X and 1 and 8 and 2. So normally a diagram will help you to really understand. So let's say you're drawing on a Cartesian plane, which I advise you to do, but I will not do that. So you need to find where those coordinates are, and then, so let's say this is M, this is 5 and 2. They told you already that this is the midpoint, so we don't have to prove. So this is B. Let B be 8 and y, and let A be what? X and 1. Now what are we going to realize is that this part in this formula, this part of the formula gives you the x part of the midpoint. Can you see it? So this part will be equal to what? To the x part of the midpoint, because this formula is actually giving me the midpoint. So I can go ahead and equate this to the midpoint, to the x part of the midpoint, and then I can go ahead and take this one and say, okay, this one, if I'm looking for the y part of the coordinate, I can use this one. Can you see? So nothing new, nothing different. I just took the formulas outside of the bracket and I'm taking them separately. Then go to a diagram and label. This becomes your x1, y1. This becomes your x2, y2. Do you all see it? Therefore, if I'm using what I illustrated here, okay, there's an earthquake this side. Okay, I'll be fine now. So if I'm taking them separately, like what I showed you in the first part, meaning the x part of the midpoint will be equal to the sum of the x coordinates over 2. So the x part of the midpoint they gave us, we can actually substitute it. It's 5. The midpoint between these two is 5. x1 it's x, x2 it's 8 over 2. You all see it? And then to get rid of a fraction, we know always we have to multiply by the denominator on both sides. This will actually cancel out, and then in this case it will multiply because they are both numerators. Here it's a numerator over a denominator. So this time this is how much? 10 x plus 8. Take 8 to the other side, is going to be 10 minus 8. X is how much? 2, which we can write it as x2. You all see it? So we were able to calculate this point right there. All right, let's find the y part of the midpoint. y1 over y2 over 2. The y part is what? Of the midpoint is 2. So I'm going to write 2 equals to 1 plus y over 2. If you want to get rid of a fraction, what do? Multiply both sides by the denominator all the time for every question. 2 times 2 is 4, 1 plus that one. Take 1 as a constant to that side. 4 minus 1 becomes that one. 3 equals to y. We can write it as y equals to 3. Can you all see it? So we are able to calculate the midpoint if we are given 2 points. We are able to calculate the coordinates of the other 2 points if we are given the value of the midpoint. Okay, thank you so much. I think this was very helpful. These are the kind of questions they can ask you on the midpoint. They can either ask you directly to find the midpoint, or give you the midpoint and ask you to find the other missing coordinates.